On the show. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
How are things going there?
Well, we just passed a budget. We were $8 billion in the hole. We've reformed Medicaid and actually have the AARP support our program. We did sentencing reform where we're not going to lock people up in a state prison who are 12,000 of them go to prison for less than a year. We stick them next to a murderer and a rapist, and then we release them, and we think we did a good job. We've changed all that, something that people wouldn't deal with for 25 years. We've privatized our development department. We have improved the cost savings for higher education. We have great choice in education. We killed the death tax.
How's your approval rating?
Well, depends. Well, look, you know,
he was giving me a good list.
Let me tell you, this is part of the problem I see in Washington. Okay. Look, I mean, approval ratings depends on who takes a poll and what the poll is. Bottom line is, my state was dying, okay? My state was dying, and it was my job to get us out of this. We jumped, according to MSNBC or CNBC, 11 places since I've become governor is business-friendly in America. We lost 600,000 jobs. We lost more jobs than every state except for Michigan and California. It's my job to dig us out of this thing, and we are open for business, and we are winning, and we are stabilizing. And we're gaining. Now, let me just tell you this. But here's the point. No, here's the point. Here's the question. What are you going to do? This is what politicians have been doing.
Yeah.
How's it feel?
How's it feel?
You know what a leader does?
Which way is it flowing?
I heard you talking about I could go down to my district and sell things. Well, it's important to bring the folks along. It is important. You can't get too far out there. On the other hand, it's not your job to do a poll to figure out what you do.
Exactly.
Edmund Burke says use your judgment.
Exactly.
And so that's what's happening now in D.C., which has become totally dysfunctional.
Hey, can you believe that? I mean, well, we'll get to D.C. in a second, but I'll tell you what surprises me is before that failed. Then I read the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, pretty glowing, saying that you did it without a lot of drama. There were the protests.
There was no drama.
But that you got a lot of stuff done, which, again, it's surprising. The New York Times take.
The negatives that I have, a glowing editorial in the Wall Street Journal, glowing piece in the New York Times. What's driven my negatives up is the fact that we're trying to rein in and give local communities the ability to control their costs with public employees. Deval Patrick has done, in some ways, more radical things than what I proposed in Ohio. So it's just protesters and noise. But when it comes to the budget, no protests, no noise, and we got it through, and got through, you know, virtually all of what we really wanted.
I'm going to tell you something.
Tell me something.
The governor and I were talking before this segment began. We were talking about what's going on in Washington with the, you know, raise the debt ceiling and the, you know, tax reform and everything like that. And he was talking about, you know, he's in favor of closing some loopholes. If you guys were back in the House in this deal,
wait a minute. Look, Joe, I'm one of the few. Look, I don't want to toot this other than to say, I was one of the chief architects of the last time we balanced the budget.
Yes, you were.
And we balanced the budget in the state of Ohio without a tax increase. In fact, with tax cuts to make us more competitive. And I've been in both places. So what I have to say is not theory. What I think is happening. Look, remember back in when we were running the place down there, we actually went through a government shutdown. And you know why? The Clinton administration wanted to cook the books and said we would grow our way out of it. I said, no way. They ended up coming back to the table, and we got the first balanced budget since man walked on the moon. We had surpluses, and the economy grew.
By the way, balanced the budget 4 years in a row for the first time since the 1920s. That would have never happened. And this was my point earlier about what's happening in Washington right now. If we had not stared down the president, President Clinton, if we had not been called murderers and rapists and all the other things, the horrible Nazis, the things that all the newspapers wrote about us, if we had not stared into the abyss.
Said that about welfare reform, too.
Yeah, said that about welfare reform. Said, but we heard for a year that we were going to throw little children out into the street, that we were racist, that we were bigots, that we were horrible human beings. And you know what? Unlike what's going on in Washington now, we stared down our opponents, and look what happened.
Here's 4 years in a row. Here's what I think can happen. First of all,
what can happen?
You got to have the cuts. or the reforms that save the money. I'm not a big guy for cutting. I'm a big guy for reforming. We're saving money in Medicaid, billions of dollars, by letting mom and dad stay in their own home without having to go in a nursing home. They're more comfortable. We save a ton of money, okay? There are ways in which you can save money by reforming. We did a lot of that when we were in. But what happened when we were there is both the Clinton administration and the Republicans said we need to do this. We don't have this right now. This trillions of dollars in the national debt, first of all, you can't default. And trillions of dollars in the national debt, at some point, it is going to sink our children's future. Now, what I think needs to happen is you make the cuts, you close these loopholes on, hey, these hedge funds getting treated, with capital gains, ridiculous. The corporate jet loophole, close it up. But don't raise rates. Lower the corporate. But that's a good compromise.
That is a great compromise, and that's what we've been saying. Why can't we get that compromise?
Honestly, I know there's Republicans that would vote against that. But right now, the administration wants rate increases. The problem with rate increases is it kills your economy.
Okay, but I think Pat Buchanan, we could get a deal in Washington, D.C., maybe a $2 trillion, $3 trillion deal, $3.5 trillion deal, if you close a lot of these tax loopholes. Shouldn't the Republicans come to the table and say, listen, you take care of Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security reform, then we'll come and we'll close some of these loopholes that John Kasich's base would support, that my base back when I ran would support, that your base would even support, Pat?
We find the support.
My base would support it if Kasich's base would support it, if rates come down.
Yeah, that's right.
We would agree to that. Let me ask Congressman Kasich, Governor Kasich, excuse me, Governor, excuse me. Do you agree with the stand that Eric Cantor is taking right now?
I don't know what his stand is. I don't follow all this theater down. What is his stand, Pat? I don't know what it is.
His stand is basically your stand that he's not going to go. They'll close the loopholes, but only for reduced rates, and there's going to be no increase in revenue.
No, you cannot raise the margin. Look, what we have to achieve in America, I saw a little headline here, China's economy is going to grow faster than America's in 2016. Everything we need to do in America should be designed to improve investment and lead to economic growth. That's how you get yourself out of this stuff. Now, that means, different than what it used to be, Joe, you got to cut spending, and you reduce taxes, or you close these loopholes and bring marginal rates down, or like Clinton suggested, lower the corporate tax rate, make us more competitive in the world. Right. Those two things will give us economic growth. I think the administration is hung up on higher rates, and higher rates, Mike, it's not going to work.
But closing the loopholes, do you think closing the loopholes would provide you with enough revenue, widen the revenue stream, that you wouldn't have to go to tax increases?
Yeah, I think there's enough in that code.
If you really go at it.
If you really do it. And, here's the thing. When you do that, that ought to come a little later. Because I'll tell you what Congress will do. Republicans blew the big surplus, Joe.
Oh, my God.
They went on a spending binge. We couldn't believe it after 2000. What you have to do is you've got to get the savings up front, Mike, because you know what they'll do? They'll spend the money. You give them more revenue, they'll spend the money. I'm telling you. And this business about caps and gimmicks and all that, do your job. And, Joe, you said it again here. I just want to correct you on one thing, if I could.
Here goes.
And this is what Pat says. Go out and sell your base.
Right.
Part of it is be a leader.
Right.
You don't know how long you're going to be in. Make choices. There's nothing wrong with dying in politics. Churchill said you can die 1,000 times in politics, only once in war. Have courage. Think about your children and the country. That's what we did when we went through the shutdown and when we got the balanced budget done.
And John,
that's what I'm doing in Ohio.
And my point was, if I can get a $4 trillion deal, by closing loopholes, and I'll have some people in Washington on the right saying Joe Scarborough supports tax increases. If I can do that, I will go down to my district, and I would gladly die 1,000 political deaths if I can get $4 trillion instead of no deal at all.
Absolutely.
If I can close the tax loopholes.
Well, and
I will tell you there are some Republicans.
there's one good example where they get this big break.
There's some Republicans on the right that won't close a single loopholes. There are some Democrats on the left that won't touch Medicare when we all know that that's the
Get it in the middle.
You have to get it in the middle.
And if you want to put your head in the sand and you want to get yourself in a position of where you let America default, You got to be kidding me. America's not going to pay its bills. Not on our watch, Joe Scarborough. Not on our watch did that happen.
There you go.
It did not.
There's no question you're doing big things on your budget, but a lot of people in your state questioning how you're doing it. The city of Cleveland just had 42 police officers graduate from the academy. They were immediately laid off. 321 public employees in Cleveland laid off. And a lot of them feel like you're balancing the budget or attempting to on their backs, even as they're being laid off. Talking about Senate Bill